Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. How's Eddie Frederick?
So glad you can join us. Jamaica's new Firearms Act under parliamentary review. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Thursday, 14th April 2022. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Multi-Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. A joint parliamentary select committee in Jamaica is reviewing the new Firearms Act with a view to bringing some balance to its passage. More in this television Jamaica news item.
Among the issues being hotly debated is a proposal to have mandatory minimum sentences. Now, to provide us with some more insight, we're joined by our legal correspondent, Dion Jackson Miller. Thank you so much for joining us, Dion. First of all, what are mandatory minimums and why should we care?
Well, mandatory minimums are when the Parliament puts in place in legislation minimum sentences that can be applied. So in relation to the firearm legislation, which is now being debated before the Joint Select Committee, there's a controversial provision that if you are convicted for illegal possession of firearm, you will have a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. In other words, in sentencing you, the judge has to start at 15 years and can't go below that. Why do we care? Why should we care? Well, it's controversial because what it does is take away the discretion of the sentencing judge. It prevents the sentencing judge from looking at the facts of the matter, the circumstances of the case, the characteristics of the defendant, and tailoring a sentence that is appropriate and proportional in the circumstances. So I've seen some people saying that those who oppose mandatory minimums, and I'm one of them, I don't like them, that you're soft on crime or you're trying to ensure lenient sentences. And it's a very disingenuous and unfortunate argument, because what you want, Janela, is to have the judge be able to impose a fair sentence, because it's the judge, after all, who has the facts of the matter in front of him or her.
Now, can this be challenged in court, though?
It can, and it has been in some jurisdictions. Recently here in Jamaica, and remember, for us here in Jamaica, the age of criminal responsibility is 12. Once you're 12, you can be charged with a criminal offense, and if that offense attracts a mandatory minimum, you're going to be caught by that. So in 2020, in fact, in our Court of Appeal, in a case called Tafari Morrison, a young man who was 16 at the age when he committed the offenses challenged it, saying it's unconstitutional for mandatory minimums to apply to a child. The Court of Appeal ruled against him, though, saying that our Parliament has put in place a scenario in which if you're under 14, you can be sentenced to up to 25 years, over 14, up to life. And in those circumstances, a sentence couldn't be said to be grossly disproportionate, which is a test they use. But we've seen it struck down in other jurisdictions. So the Caribbean Court of Justice in a Belize case struck down a $50,000 fine as being disproportionate, as saying that the majority of people in Belize would not be able to afford that fine. And the CCJ said the courts will always look at mandatory minimum sentences with a quote-unquote wary eye. That was a case called Zuniga. So it's something that has been challenged elsewhere, has been challenged here, although it failed in that case, but we'll have to see what happens in this situation.
And of course, the Joint Select Committee of Parliament will continue their review of that new Firearms Act.
An assurance from the Minister of Trade in Trinidad and Tobago that the government there continues to explore means of addressing the ever-increasing cost of food. At this time, the state is evaluating additional items for zero rating and reduced common external tariff, among other measures. This as inflation is at its highest in decades. Renessa Cutting of TV6 News has more.
Food prices continue to soar, both globally and locally, with the United Nations Food Price Index putting prices at their highest yet in decades.
Averaged 98.1 in 2020, and hear this, to 125.7 in 2021, accounting for a 28.13% increase. And last Friday, the food price index published by the FAO averaged 159.3 points in March, up 12.6% from February, when it had already reached its highest level since its inception in 1990.
The Trade Minister says while government cannot control these external factors, it continues to work assiduously to help offset the burden. In October of 2021, VAT was removed from a number of basic food items. 5 months later, the Trade Minister is reporting that the move was impactful.
The central bank's March 2022 monetary policy announcement has confirmed the positive impact of this measure in mitigating the full impact of basic food price increases. And I would tell you that Roxanne sent me a little note last week. Here are some other food items that you all can consider eliminating the VAT on. So Roxanne will analyze.
In addition to zero rating food items, the common external tariff was also adjusted on some goods.
There are 20 items. I'm looking to see wherever I can make a recommendation to Cabinet if there are any other items which we should reduce the CET on. And of course, the rollout of an agriculture stimulus package, and of course, strengthening linkages between industry and agriculture to promote greater synergies between industry and the domestic agriculture sector, and the implementation of a food price monitoring mechanism by the Consumer Affairs Division.
The minister notes that both the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war continue to cause volatility along the supply chain. But CEO of Massey Group, Gervais Warner, notes that despite the challenges, Massey has managed exceedingly well.
First world versus us. You remember during the pandemic, you've seen in the news that many supermarkets in the United States had the bare shelves, all the toilet paper gone, all the water gone, that kind of thing. Happened in Trinidad? No, not at Massey stores. Try to find ways to source things at lower prices. It wouldn't be necessarily the same brand you're accustomed to seeing. Buying more local, supporting our local industries to be able to make sure that we get through this episode thriving.
Both the minister and Mr. Warner were speaking at the opening of Massey stores in Brentwood, Massey's 23rd and the largest grocery store in TNT. Renessa Cutting, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Hero, a film based on the extraordinary life of Trinidadian World War II navigator Ulrich Cross, is finally being shown in local cinemas. It premiered on Thursday evening. TV6's Sharla Kisto has more.
Can't say that I have family to leave behind necessarily. My mother died when I was 13. Not too long after that, my father abandoned all of me.
Long lines, a packed theatre, and elegantly dressed people gathered at Movie Town for the premiere of Hero, a movie inspired by the life of the late Ulrich Cross. Patrons welcomed the initiative enthusiastically. The movie Hero is not only a revelation about the life of Ulrich Cross, it also pays homage to the incredibly transformative times in which he lived. Cross was a Trinidadian jurist, diplomat, and he was recognized as possibly the most decorated West Indian of World War II. Movie lovers will get the chance to understand Cross's life from a young boy into adulthood as the movie dives deep into the experience of this remarkable man during his pivotal moments in the 20th century. In a sit-down interview with TV6, lead actor Nikolai Salcedo, who portrayed Ulrich Cross, told us it was a privilege to be part of a film that will be timeless in years to come. He describes it as an adventure.
When I found out I got the role, I guess I just looked at it like, well, okay, it's a new role. I didn't think too heavily about what it would do to me. But then we began, and the process of learning about Ulrich was a lot of research and a very historical journey. And because of the fact he was a real person in life, and it wasn't just some a character out of fantasy. It was a very different experience having to read into somebody's history, learn about who they were, and the times they lived in. and try to faithfully reenact that, or at least faithfully channel that.
The story of Ulrich Cross was brought to life through an international cast of screen actors. Salcido describes working with them as smooth sailing.
Just interacting with the actors from the different countries was mind-blowing. Going to the UK first, meeting Joseph Marcel from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and meeting Jimmy Akingbola and Pippa Nixon, who played Anne Cross in the film, and Eric Kofi Brefa. And then going on to Ghana and meeting John Dumelo and Ajite Anang and all of the huge Ghanaian film actors who are like huge mega stars. And then to go to Canada and meet Peter Williams, he's another mega star, and a really cool guy, So it was always just meeting people who I felt like it was brothers and sisters.
He encourages Trinbagonians to look at the film, saying this movie is something that will change the way Trinbagonians view themselves.
Easter is a time to rejoice, even in uncertain times. That's the message that Christians are being encouraged to ponder upon throughout Holy Week. Zane Romulus of the DBS News World out of St. Lucia reports.
As the Russia-Ukraine conflict drags on, so too does the state of uncertainty which people the world over have been experiencing in the past 2 years of the COVID pandemic. Yet in the midst of the uncertainty, as Christians celebrate Holy Week, they are being encouraged to take comfort in the message of hope that Easter brings.
The message of Easter is always one of joy, one of hope, that death does not end in the grave, but that death ends in resurrection. And so we despite the challenges that we may face in our earthly life, death does not end in the grave, and that is one of the things that, especially at funeral liturgies, it's always good to point out, because when people are stricken by grief, sometimes it can really lead to disillusionment, and but to be able to remind everybody that death for the Christian does not end in the grave, but that we await the resurrection, when we will not experience sickness and pain and suffering and anymore, but then we will be reunited with our loved ones and with our Lord.
This time last year, all the churches were restricted in their activities due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But with most measures removed, the church pews are expected to fill up with worshippers, and even more gatherings around the island planned.
We've had to make a lot of adjustments, but this year it certainly looks better, and I think a lot of our people are returning because we can accommodate more people in church than we were able to. Yes, but you cannot stop the fact that some people will use it as their time to socialize. But there is a significant number of people in the nation who are still committed and use this as a great time of prayer.
The Roman Catholic Church will also this Easter Sunday hold the installation ceremony for the new Archbishop Gabriel Malze. For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
An international economist warns that while the government of Barbados' move to increase taxes on sweetened beverages is welcomed, it will not be enough to remedy the country's non-communicable diseases. More in this Barbados Today news item.
International economist Dr. Justin Ramsell warned the excise tax on sugar-sweetened beverages was doubled, moving from 10% to 20%. Speaking on a conversation about sugar in the Barbadian Society, spearheaded by the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados and the Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition on state television last night, Dr. Ram said it will require much more.
But it certainly is insufficient. If it is a health crisis, then we need to be doing a lot more. And one of the things we have to look at here is that this health crisis is a significant externality on the rest of society. Spending $375 million per annum on NCDs is unsustainable. And we should really want to put an end to that and allocate those resources to much more productive things. So the taxes, I think, are in the right direction. We do have to consider whether we need to raise that tax further. But I would have to say here that taxation alone will not get us to where we want to be. I agree with Sir Hilary here that it has to be a much more comprehensive approach to this. which requires educating the population from a very early age, encouraging different lifestyle choices, and of course, making available other better nutritional meals and drinks available to the average person.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.